28 months down, yeah, the industry's been bruised, but we're not here to fold, we're here to refuse. While others pause, we built the plays, now we're leading the charge in a brand new phase. You feel that tension, that's the pressure to grow. Hiring's messy, turnovers high and budgets low, but we don't panic, we adapt. We sharpen the edge and reload the map. This is the Staffing Playbook, strategy on tap. Steven brings the grit, G-Money brings the slap. Forget the fluff, forget the spin. We give you plays that actually win. From the break room floor to the boardroom seat, we've walked the walk, now we bring the heat. CDLs, forklifts, line leads, and execs. We place the best and fix the wrecks. Insight, hustle, leadership, bold. No safe takes, just the truth told cold. Wanna scale your team, wanna close that gap. We got the data, the story, and the roadmap. So turn it up, lock it in. This is more than a podcast, it's a win. This is the Staffing Playbook. Let's get to work, it starts right now.
Welcome back to the Staffing Playbook Podcast, the #1 staffing podcast in the world. I'm your host, Steve Farrell, joined by my co-host,
Geneviève Bourgeois. How are you?
Good.
I see that you're manifesting today.
I am. So, well, I think we're #1. Who's to say we're not?
Hey, you got to believe it.
All right. So today we are diving into something every staffing leader talks about, but very few achieve. We're talking about scaling from 20 million to 100 million and beyond. Our guest, Mark Winter from WinSource, is joining us today. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on. Good to see you guys. Good to be on the #1 podcast in the staffing industry.
Yes. And thank you for being our guest of honor today.
Of course.
So a little bit about Mark. He's built a sales blueprint framework that's helped staffing companies unlock growth by aligning leadership, building repeatable sales strategies, and pruning what doesn't work. Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself to the audience, for those that don't know you, which probably very few people out there today that don't know who Mark Winter is.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. So I'm Mark. I live in Washington. I have been in staffing for about 26 years. This is year 26. Ooh. So I started in staffing just like everyone else as a fluke. I don't think anybody else grows up dreaming of being in staffing. I stumbled and tripped myself into staffing. But I fell in love with it immediately. So I fell in love with it. I have held every single sales role that exists, all of them. So I started as a door knocking, quota carrying salesperson in staffing, selling deals and running a branch. And when I got out of my corporate career, I was the head of sales for a large staffing organization. So I've done everything from sales operations to sales enablement to selling to leading small and big sales teams, you name it, all that stuff. So I've carried that into my own personal career now. This is like V2, career V2. So now I do consulting in the staffing industry. We do predominantly staffing, and it's all sales all the time. So let's go with what you know.
So you're telling me sales is in your DNA?
It is. Yes, it is. Yep.
Geneviève, I think we have the right person to talk about scaling sales, right?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. It sounds like you were born with it. So let's dive right in.
I don't know, born with it. I will tell you this. If I was born with it, you'd think I'd have been like, I've had some sales trip ups along the way. And those are the best learnings. One of the things that I think makes a person you've mentioned the blueprint already. So I'll capitalize on that. One of the things that makes a person qualified to read blueprints is knowing what's supposed to be on there, but more importantly, what's not supposed to be on there. And the company that I worked for, I feel like gave me a Harvard education in all things staffing sales. And seeing what works and what doesn't is part of that. It's not just this innate thing that can't be replicated. It's seeing other people go through it. That's such a big help.
I love that. Just clear, simple, what should be on there, but also what shouldn't be.
Yeah. And
I think that's the hardest part right there.
It is. I know.
Identifying. Yep.
I
All right. You ready to dive in?
Let's go.
I'm
Buckle
ready.
up.
Let's do it.
So, Mark, a lot of leaders hear these numbers, 20 million to 100 million. Most firms don't get to that 100 million mark or beyond. But there's a lot that changes along the way. And so I want to make that clear for our listeners today is, this is a blueprint, whatever size of firm that you're at. If you're a $5 million firm trying to reach 10 or 20, if you're a $20 million firm trying to get to 50 to 70 to 100, this is for you. This is going to be the blueprint that's been scalable, as Mark just referenced earlier, what works and what doesn't. So let's start from the top. What's the short version of your sales blueprint? Why do you think it connects so strongly with the staffing executives that you work with that want to scale big?
So the biggest part of the sales blueprint are the steps that we take to get the blueprint done and the flexibility that the blueprint offers. So let me tell you a little bit about it. So any business, doesn't matter if it's staffing or not, any business starts with what are we trying to accomplish for the world or for our marketplace? And we turn that into strategy. So the blueprint is heavy strategy focused. Like, what are we trying to accomplish? What do we want people to do? Where do we want to go? Who do we want to serve? All those things. And then we look at structure, people, process, and resources. So once we figure out how we've got our strategy laid out and what we want to accomplish and achieve, then we look at, well, what structure do we need to put in place to support that? How do we need to accomplish it? What do we need to do to have people do the work of the strategy? Once we have that, then we look at getting the right people. Then we look at putting in processes that those people can enact. And then we support those people with tools and resources, whether it be technology or marketing or whatever the deal is. But that's kind of the recipe to success, is starting with the strategy. Where do you want to go? What do you want to be? What's the vision? And that's just so business 101, but you'd be amazed at how many businesses don't have that anymore. And I say they don't have that anymore because they did once. They did when they started the company. They brainstormed and they whiteboarded and they put all this stuff together. And then somewhere along the line, the business took them somewhere else and they lost track of that. It got hazy and cloudy. And so now they have a really hard time articulating that vision. And so we help them get that back together. That's the first step. If we can't get the vision clear, then nothing else is going to work. So that's kind of the recipe: strategy, structure, people, process, and resources. But as I told you guys in prep for this, no two blueprints we've done have ever been the same. They're totally unique to the business, and they're designed to be that way. This isn't meant to be cookie cutter. If it was that cookie cutter, we'd all be running franchises of the same staffing company, and that's just not the way it works, right? Nobody wants that, I don't think. So we tailor the blueprint to the individual, to their wants and needs, to how they serve their market, to their people, their teams. Their desire to, whether their desire is to serve or their desire is to make money or their desire is to scale, we kind of tailor the blueprint to all that. So I tell you all that, and I'm insinuating a lot of flexibility there. The other thing that I know is that time will change business. So if you look at how much staffing has changed in the last 5 to 10 years, it's crazy town. So much has changed in all things staffing, regulation, the way the business operates, and sales. So we know that things are changing even faster. And part of the blueprint is allowing it to be flexible enough to say, okay, whatever the blueprint is today, it may not be the same next year or in 6 months or in 2 years. So we have to allow for that flexibility, because gone are the days where you can have a 3 to 5 year or 10-year plan. You can directionally say you want to go somewhere, but the thought that you can control a plan for 5 years is ludicrous. So we try to make sure that we've got something solid and something that we can communicate to the organization, but also something that we know is going to change. We write them in pencil. We write them in pencil.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, so here, just a quick follow-up question on that. For a company that is running a $20 million just staffing firm, what do you think is going to be the first piece of the blueprint that they notice in practice? Is it going to be the processing? Is it going to be the pricing, the leadership clarity? Like what have you generally found?
Yeah, that $20 million mark is significant because that's the point where the owner or the person in charge definitely starts to have two jobs. The first job of running the $20 million entity, whatever that looks like, multiple branches or on-sites or whatever, and scaling. Now they've got to do what's next. So they clearly have two hats because I think that if you look at the average large staffing company, the middle managers, district managers, market managers, they're running $20 million business. It can be run by one person successfully. But when you tip that scale, you go to the next level, you're going just over 20. Now you got two clear jobs, one to scale, one to run. And so when that happens, there's a lot of communication floating around like, well, what are we now? What do we want to be? Where are we today? Where do we want to go? And those two lines get very blurred. So the very first thing we do at that $20 million mark is clarify what it is we're trying to do. What does it take to make the business run today? And what are these cool things that we keep talking about in the future? So because people get super confused by that. They get super confused. So you have a leader that's a visionary and an operator, and they start throwing around terms like, hey, we're going to get into healthcare. Well, everybody who's doing the $20 million worth of business pumps the brakes and says, well, I just want to wait for a minute and find out what we're doing with this healthcare thing. I heard we're going into healthcare, so I'm not going to do anything else. Now, all of a sudden, you got an $18 million business. Whoa, right? That's not what we want. So at that $20 million mark, the first thing that we try to really do is get clear on where are we coming from and get clear on the vision of where are we going to and separate those two things because they're two plans. Our operating plan is very different from our strategic growth plan.
That's really interesting, Mark. You brought up a couple of points that really hit home for me. First, you talk about as a startup staffing firm, first few years, they're experiencing growth. They have that vision, that strategy, that structure. They're identifying the right people. They're putting the right processes in place. They're bringing the tools and resources to support the organization. And, that's good for the size of the business that they're at today. And possibly they've put enough infrastructure in place to say this is enough for the size of our business that's going to be, a year or 2 years from now. But you hit this point where, like the owner who's also the operator at a $20 million firm. Like I was a regional manager for a $50 million region, a $65 million region. And I was successful. I felt supported. But if that was my firm, if I was the owner and the operator, there's no way I could have managed that size of a business, that book of business, because I was relying on all the tools and resources and processes and strategy in place, everything from the C-suite to marketing to the operations department to compliance and safety. That was all behind me supporting my growth, my team's growth, and it worked. But at a $20 million firm, that's quickly going to break, and you're going to have to revamp that structure, the processes, add tools and resources and people. And I think that's where a lot in your mind, and based on what you've shared, I think that's where the bottleneck is. And you mentioned something else, that executive alignment. When you're going in and consulting these firms, and you're meeting with a $20 million firm, they want to grow, they want to get into healthcare, but often there's some misalignment at the executive level. Can you maybe dig into that? What's killing that momentum? The strategy, how do you help them find clarity?
Yeah, so I'll get to that in a second. I want to touch on one other important point at this $20 million hump. And you just said it, it's the reliance on people. So whoever owns the business now has to rely on someone else to get something done. And here's the thing, here's the rub. They can't afford to hire everybody they want to do that. So they have to make choices. They have to make strategic choices. So let me tell you what I mean. At that level, I might say my best move might be to bring in a CFO type person or a strong controller. I now have to pawn off all the back office stuff and payroll to someone else or someone else's team. I'm completely reliant on them. That's one option. Another option might be at that stage, maybe I built this business around selling, and I can no longer just tell my sellers, hey, do what I do, because they don't get it. They don't see it. So now I have to bring in a sales leader. Could be. Maybe I'm in a recruiting business and my recruiting pipeline is just out of control and there's so much automation to it that I can't manage it anymore by myself. I got to bring in a recruiting manager. Now, I can't hire all three of those people. I can't hire a finance person, a sales manager, and a recruiting leader all at the same time at $20 million. The math doesn't math. So I got to make some choices now. What are my functions? What can I do? So at this stage, we help people figure out, well, what is your reliance on people? And what can you do to get the most bang for your buck from the people that you're going to bring in? Because they're going to be new roles. So we might help them with, do you hire from the outside or do you groom somebody up? Either one of those choices will work, but they come with pros and cons. We might help them with, sometimes I'll see a leader that's like, well, you know what? We're going to have my sister's nephew on her brother's side I don't know, just making that up, and he's gonna come in part-time and do the books because he took a QuickBooks class at community college. So that's gonna be, and I'm like, oh my God. So we kind of help them through some of that, figuring out like what's a real role and we don't want to hold the thing together with duct tape. So I just want to say at this level, we are very reliant on people. We're making some strategic choices that really rely on different roles in people.
And it sounds like what you're doing is identifying and defining what impediments they have and what can be taken off their plate and help them actually focus in on either, like you said, either scaling or running the operations and having that clear communication, having everything running in parallel lines, but defining what the actual issues are and figuring out who your clients, especially like for that smaller firm that's at 20 million, they're looking to grow and scale to really, because like you said, you can't hire everyone.
Can't hire
everyone.
I'd
love to.
And there are impacts to those choices. So think about a sales leader. So you say, all right, I need to hire a sales leader. Well, the natural choice might be, I'm going to hire someone familiar because I already work with them and I can just promote them. I'm going to take one of my better salespeople and promote them. They have no sales leadership experience. Well, in my mind, I automatically think when I hear that, it's going to take 6 months to a year for that person to get their feet under them. So if that CEO or that business owner says, I'm going to make that strategic choice and I'm going to go flip over into this new vertical, I'm like, well, those two things don't jive. It's going to take you 6 months to a year to get your sales leader going. It's going to take you 6 months to a year to get into this new vertical. You're going to have a crash. You're not going to recoup any revenue. This is going to be a straight drain on you for a year. Are you prepared for that? And they're usually not. So the other choice might be, well, I need to hire somebody from the outside, but boy, isn't that going to be expensive? Yes, it is going to be expensive. Yeah. But you're buying all of their competency and they're going to be ready on day 1 or day 30, whenever they acclimate. But that
is the clarity that, sorry, Marcus, that's the clarity that I think a lot of these agency owners at 20 million, have a hard time defining, right? Yeah. And so there's a lot of alignment gaps. So if we move into like the ratchets of growth, when you talk so a firm that goes to 5 million doesn't work at 20 million. Their operations, their people, their processes, their strategy. And so once you help them, fix that at 20 million and they start growing, and then again at 50 million, what happens? Like, what are those 2 or 3 big shifts that a company going from 20 million now is at 50 million? I mean, that's a huge jump. You more than doubled their business. Walk us through some of that.
Yeah. So that's, and I totally avoided the last question that you asked.
It's fine.
So, but that's where this 20 to 50 million, that's where this executive alignment becomes really important for sure. When I got into consulting, I thought that one of the jobs of a consultant was to go in and sniff out poor performance. And it partially is, but that's so much more rare because poor performance makes itself, it shows itself very easily. What will actually bring a business to its knees faster than poor performance are good executives that are misaligned. They're actually doing the right thing. They're just not doing it together. It's like a bad third grade choir. It sounds awful. You just want it to stop. But you have the head of finance doing one thing. The CEO has a vision that nobody else can articulate. The head of sales has a vision and is doing things without much guidance or oversight. The operations leader is just doing what they think to be the right thing. And all four of those people are pulling the teams in marginally different directions, and it fractures the organization. It brings it to its knees. And they don't even have to be completely it's not like I'm going into healthcare and you're going into IT. It doesn't even show up like that. That would be easy. It shows up like, hey, I want your primary mission every day to be responsible, taking care of the workers and pulling the workers and getting your pipeline full. And then the sales leader comes by and says, you got to spend 6 hours a day out in the field, knocking doors and making calls. And now you've got a branch manager, let's call it, that doesn't do either one well. And both of those things are right. You need a good recruiting pipeline and you need to be out in the field and selling as much as you can. Those are both right things. But when a confused mind says no, when a person hears both of those things from two different people that are in charge and those two people aren't aligned, they don't try to do both. They don't try to fit both in. They generally don't do either one. So that executive alignment is key. Getting them to sing the same song, getting them to say the same things, even if it's just a few core objectives. And going back to my original thing of getting them to say no to some things like, hey, we're not going to do that, or we're going to put that on the back burner for a while. That's pretty important too. The other thing that starts to show up between 20 and 50 million is diversification. So what got you here won't get you there. It's that old adage.
Mm-hmm.
And so, between 20 and 50 million, we often have a couple of star performers. And one of the huge mistakes that I see business owners do at this level is they start to model the next part of their business off of the anomalies in their business. So we got this guy, Chuck, who runs our branch, and that branch does 5 times more than every other branch out there. And what we want are 4 or 5 more Chucks out there. So Chuck does X amount in revenue. He's doing $10 million and all the other branches are doing $3 million. So we want 4 more Chuck branches out there. So we model Chuck's branch. We try to replicate what Chuck does. We build processes around who Chuck is. Well, the reality is Chuck's not real. Chuck, if we gave Chuck a job doing underwater basket weaving, he'd produce a $10 million branch. If he sold cars, he'd be the best car salesperson. If he was a fireman, he'd be the first one in the building. He's just that guy.
I want to hire Chuck.
Right? Everybody wants to hire Chuck. Here's the thing. You can't scale around Chuck. You have to scale around the next best guy or lady or whoever. You know what I mean? The next best. That's the one that's replicatable. That's the one you need to look at for the cookie cutter, start to create processes type approach and start to diversify on that person's actions. Because that's more pragmatic. That's more realistic. That's, who knows what Chuck's doing? It could be Chuck's in a good market. It could be Chuck's got a ballin' customer. Chuck's got, whatever it is, but Chuck's the anomaly. And we can't build a business. We're not going to get from 20 to 50 million with 4 Chucks. We're more likely going to get there with, Sally, who's doing $4 or $5 million, has a replicatable process, easy to learn, does consistently every day what she should be doing. We can take Sally and now what we need is 15 Sallys. That's what we need to get to 50 million.
100%.
I absolutely love that. And the fact that most of these companies, they're trying to grow and scale based off of outliers. And it could be anything impacting that market. Okay.
Anything. Could be anything.
No, I absolutely love that. So just for we've already talked about Chuck and Sally, but so let's just go and think about another persona of a $25 million company. What's one change that they would go and feel immediately if they went and they adopted that ratchet?
Say that. Ask me that again. Say that again.
Okay. So we're getting back to the whole ratchets of growth. And when it comes to the $25 million company, right? And what is one of the first changes that they would start to see immediately if they start to adapt into the whole ratchet process?
Oh, I see. I gotcha.
There
So,
we go.
yeah. So the first thing is the executive team, the leadership team is going to end up doing more meetings. They need to communicate more effectively. The change here, where their job shifts from being in the trenches to leading a little bit behind a laptop, and they get so resistant sometimes. They feel like, oh, I got to be out there. I got to lead from the front. Yes, true statement. But a big portion of your job is alignment and communication now, because you have these moving parts and you have this new stuff that you're introducing, and you've got to make sure that that integrates really well. And so that's your job. That's your job. That's how you're going to help scale. Not, you can't close that deal anymore. You can't go on that appointment even if you want to. Sometimes you can, but that's not your primary focus anymore. That's a support role now. That's not the primary. Your primary is communication. You know, at this, communication is so important at this stage, and the shift, the mindset shift that has to happen here is you can't just say it or send an email. Communication at this level isn't about what's said, it's about what's heard. And people don't hear things well the first time because there's noise in organizations at 25 million or 20 million. There's a lot going on. People are self-centered. They're like, well, does that even impact me? What does that mean for me and my job? And do I get paid more for that? And, you know, so there's all this. So you got to say things a couple of times. And so executives find at this level that they're spending more time behind a laptop. They're having more meetings. They're having town halls. They're having streamlined communication to get things heard instead of just saying them a couple times and expecting them to get done. So that's the biggest shift. Their job changes.
Nope, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. That's fantastic. So like they're going to be leading behind a laptop. They can't be on the front lines anymore. All right. More meetings, more communication. And I love the way how you put it. People aren't going to listen to what's said, but what's heard.
That's right. Yeah. And it's all open to interpretation. You can say the same thing to three people and they might interpret it all very differently. So you got to make sure that,
you know, a game of telephone.
It totally is. I was having a conversation with a mid-level leader just this past week, and he said, well, I had this conference call. I had everybody on the conference call. We got off the call. Nobody did what I asked. No kidding. Here's what should have happened. You should have called all three of those people up front, asked them, what do you all think about this thing? And then you have the call, like, boom, here's the decision. And then you call after and say, hey, all three people individually, what are going to be some of the roadblocks or stumbling blocks to getting this done? And when can I expect your performance to kick in? And he's like, that's a lot of calls. That sounds like a huge time suck. And I said, yes, it is. But if you don't have time to do it right the first time, how are you going to have time to do it over? And that's what you're facing now, right? You're now having to circle back with all three. What are you going to do now? Schedule another meeting, or it just doesn't get done? Or you have to do this. You have to communicate effectively. And it's such a big thing after that 20 million. Because again, you're focused on the future and movement and business operations.
Yeah. If you think, go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing that shows up here that's really big is process starts to emerge. We have to have a process. So I'll go back to Chuck. Our business, a quarter of our business is based around Chuck and the way he operates things. That may not be the way that everybody else operates things. So we take our performance today and we say, what is our process? And does that support our strategy? Do we have the structure in place to enact that process? Are people capable of living through that process? And so many businesses don't do that. They have a process, or they're trying to replicate Chuck's process, and they're really frustrated because what they see is, well, Chuck's doing this cool thing over there, and then I have a branch in Indianapolis that's doing this, and then I have a branch in Texas that's doing this, and I don't want to mess with the system, but I do need to figure out a way to scale those three very different locations. Help me. And I'm like, well, yeah. We're gonna have to blow some stuff up first. We gotta let's just maybe we let Indy and Texas operate, or we let Indy and Chuck do whatever it is they're gonna do, and then we focus on Texas and we scale the Texas process, right? What is it? And we go back to the basics. Well, what is it you want your business to do? How do you want it to serve customers? What problems do you solve? And let's scale out from there. And then whatever we build next is more of a replication of the processes in Texas, which now reflect the business. And Chuck becomes the anomaly that we just support in kind of a bubble, maybe. That's one.
That makes sense. And, speaking of blowing things up, Mark, You and I were talking about this the other day. Growth isn't just addition. Sometimes it's subtraction, right? You mentioned where you were consulting a customer that, you advised that, for them to hit their growth goals, they're likely going to have to close some offices.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your thought process through this, of how, walking away from an unprofitable customer might be a good business strategy, closing a branch might be a good business strategy for growth?
Yep. Business owners hate to fail. They see any type of failure as just straight up failure, and they don't want to. They don't know when to call the ball, and so sometimes, guilt is the most expensive thing that business owners carry around. They're guilty because, I don't want to close the branch. I opened that branch, and people are dependent on me for. That's super expensive. You're going to carry that burden for a long time. A customer, we have this big customer, and it's a big logo, and they're one of the best employers in the market, but our margins are razor thin, and we have 2 injuries a quarter. Well, you can't operate that way. It doesn't matter. The logo doesn't matter. The 100 people you have going out there really don't matter. It just means you're going to get to negative growth faster, actually. Or sometimes I see it with poor performers. So they have a person that used to be a really good performer, and now they just have a piss poor attitude. They're cranky, and they treat people poorly, and they're holding on to them because they feel like they owe them something. Well, sometimes we have to, part of a leader's job, the hardest part of a leader's job is saying no to and turning things off and knowing when to call the ball, and you got to do it fast. And so, yeah, you're right. We worked with a client recently where the recommendation was, hey, we got to close a bunch of branches. We got to close a bunch of these branches and reallocate that revenue into other things. And what we saw was a huge NOI swing. And now we've got money to do other things. Now, yes, did it suck laying people off and closing branches? And do we all lament the fact that we're not in that city that we know has potential? Yes, but we can always go back there when we get the scale engine going. So it stinks. It's ripping the Band-Aid off. It hurts for a minute, but the benefits outweigh everything else. And sometimes you have to do that. You got to make some tough choices as a leader, and that's a big part of the scale.
So that's a scary thought.
It is.
Right? I'm thinking for leaders that are listening here, there's some fear the hit they're going to take to top line revenue. They're constantly questioning themselves. Am I making the right call? This was my baby. This was my first branch I opened for the company, whatever it may be. Started my first, big customers. So how do you know you're making the right call?
Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just have to trust your gut, right? I mean, there's the entrepreneurs that are listening to this. They had a good gut. They got themselves to $20 million. Fantastic. Trust your gut. The other thing is, the safety net is get a partner. So call a consultant. Obviously, a consultant's going to tell you that, right? Call a consultant. But also, we have so many good networking organizations in staffing, ASA, TempNet, AS Group. There's a ton of good networking groups out there. There's roundtables you can join. You just get a buddy, get a second set of eyes on things. There's so many good people that are willing to give you their opinion. But then at the end of the day, you just have to make a decision. You just got to look at the finance, use that, be smart, use data-driven decisions to help guide you. But sometimes you just got to suck wind and do it and hope for the best. But what's the worst that can happen? You can always reopen, I say that it's, I realize what goes into it, but.
Well, here, because you mentioned earlier, like guilt is the most expensive thing that an executive or an owner can carry. Are there any actual ways that you can try to help remove that guilt whenever you are going in and consulting, being like, listen, we got to go and subtract X, Y, and Z. This is how it's going to help your bottom line. This is going to help. How do you help remove that level of guilt?
Yeah. Showing them, often they can't see past the pain of whatever the thing is. That's just a human dynamic. That's how we make decisions, right? We're fearful of that next step of what could be, and we tell ourselves these narratives and stories. And so you just have to help them paint a vision that's a more compelling story. So sometimes that's, we can reallocate those resources to something else. Yeah, maybe we'll close here, but we can reopen here. Yes, we have to shut this down and that stinks, but really, what's the pain? What's the worst case scenario? Maybe we lose a person or two, and that stinks. That's awful. Those people have been with us a long time, but maybe we can treat them well, give them good severance packages. Maybe we can bring them back, help them find employment. Who knows? But we have to come up with a game plan that feels better than the fear of whatever's next. And that's otherwise you just keep putting the decision off and you negatively impact everybody else.
Yeah, you're likely making your situation worse, and it's going to set you back even further from reaching your goals.
Yeah.
I want to jump into, the $100 million leap. So we've talked about from 5 to 20, from 20 to 50. Only about 10% of US based firms reach that 100 million or more. And it's quite significant. And so I want to talk about some of the challenges, even from 50 million to 100 million, because that I think that segment is rarely talked about.
Yep.
Because very few are in that weird spot. They're large, but they're not 100 million, but they're no $20 million firms. So some of the classic challenges that I think businesses have is you've got sales wants speed, ops wants compliance, marketing wants brand control. Like you now have these departments built out. You've got department heads.
Yep.
So how do you create this shared, mission, goals, expectations, KPIs, so they're not fighting each other?
Yeah. So this is where the blueprint path becomes so important. We go right back to strategy again. What are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to do? Because there's only a couple ways to get to 100 million bucks. You can do a geography play. Like I can open up in a whole bunch of big cities or mid-market cities. And I can just have independent running branches. That's one way to do it. So now my overhead costs are high and I run in a whole bunch of different cities. I can get to $100 million that way. The other way to do it is some type of organic growth or acquisition, but it's all about process. It's process driven. So I have something that I know the market wants and needs, and I'm going to serve the market. And so my processes become more important than my people. That's the switch from from 20 million to 50 million. It's 20 million is all about the people, 50 million is all about the process. So processes kind of take over. So between 50 and 100 million, the process, the thing you're selling has to be so good, so compelling for the client that they're like, I want more of that. Can you follow us to Sheboygan? Can you go down to Dallas with us? Can you come to California? No, nobody wants to go.
No.
But that's the way we scale. We scale because of our process and what we're doing for those customers. So when we get to the $100 million mark, we reevaluate our strategy and we say, okay, what did we set out to do? How do we get here? Do we have all these independently running entities that are all across the country, and it's okay that they're all doing something marginally different? Well, if that's the case, then marketing becomes like a fulfillment or support of them. So marketing says, hey, what do you need to run your business? That might be one path. The other path might be we're very process driven. We're following customers, and customer experience is very important. And we're in some niche industry. And so now marketing's role is more push, not requesting. They're like, hey, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to operate. So we look at each one of those roles you mentioned and we say, okay, is that role based on our scaling, based on how we grew and where we are now? Are they a fulfillment organization, or are they like a tip of the spear organization? How do they operate? And so you give assignments based on that. That's how at 100 million. Now, the other thing that I know at $100 million is whatever you think you used to be in control of, you don't control anymore. Your processes control everything. So I had someone that once, when I was coming through my corporate career and had a large part of the organization, he said, do you think you're running this thing? Like, do you think you're in the driver's seat? And I said, yes, I do. I do think I'm in the driver's seat. And he said, oh, that's part of your problem. You're not going to get out of this level then, because you're in the back of the bus and you're yelling, turn left, turn right, slow down, speed up. And you're not even in like the next seat. You're in the way back. So you're so far removed from the field. And so that analogy hit me. And I see a lot of business owners that are right around that $100 million mark. and they're like, well, I still want to have my thumb on the pulse of everything. I want to be notified. I want to call branch managers directly. And it's just not, you gotta be able to let go. You got to realize that's a strategic choice you're making when you cross that threshold, that you're removing yourself from that day to day for sure. And you're just depending on the processes and your vision of those processes to run the organization.
I absolutely love that. There's so many gems that you just provided.
Oh, I know. Like the $100 million CEO is the loudest backseat driver you're ever going to experience. That's a little scary.
But so here, I kind of have just a quick follow up to that.
Yeah.
So let's just say you are in this leadership meeting. You are noticing a lot of people finger pointing, going back and forth. What's going to be the first thing that you would suggest to go and kind of reset the room? Because sometimes you have to be like, you can't be yelling all this over here. And like, what would you do and advise other people to help reset and get the tone back to where we need to be?
Yeah. First thing is I'll pull the CEO or owner aside and say, hey, what are the non-negotiables? Not everything has to be a democracy. Sometimes we're just going to tell people what to do. We have to be nice in business, but we've lost the general patent approach of charge the hill and don't ask questions. And that's okay sometimes. I wouldn't do it all the time, but sometimes. And so I got to get that CEO to tell me what are the non-negotiables, because oftentimes the biggest fights happen over the things the CEO is not going to give on anyway. And so let's just get that on the table so that we're not kidding people into thinking that they have a voice in this decision. And let's tell them where they do have a voice. That way they're actually wrestling around the things that they can actually make an impact on. So that's the first thing. I'll pull the CEO aside and say, okay, listen, these are the non-negotiables. Let's go tell the team that. Give me 3 or 4 areas that you want them to flesh out, that you want them to bring back to you, that they can help shape that decision. So it's kind of a decision-making hierarchy that we start with. And you'd be amazed how much relief that brings to an organization, because they often fight over stuff that the owner's not going to give on anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it's like a decision-making tree.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, here, going back to basics, what are our non-negotiables? And then here, what are 3 or 4 areas in which they can have some assistance in making the overall decision to impact. Yeah. Okay. I love it.
Well, and leaders sometimes fail to recognize their decision-making style. You have the autocratic approach, you have the democratic, and you have a more of a collaborative approach. And so as a leader, you tend to kind of default to one through your day-to-day. If you're very autocratic, it's my way or the highway, the non-negotiables, you just kind of default in all of your meetings and all your decision-making. And so you have to be situational in your decision-making style. Because to your point, sometimes you just got to charge the hill, ask questions later. And other times this is very collaborative. Let's talk to each other. And then in some cases, it's a vote. You're not making the decision as the leader. You're letting the team make that decision. Yep.
And what you make the decisions about should be driven by the business owner or CEO, the objectives, right? So if an organization doesn't have clear objectives, then oftentimes they're working on people's agendas. So I would call it agendas and objectives, right? So we want them working on objectives, which are driven by the leadership team or the CEO. And those are the things how we're going to hit those objectives are the things to wrestle around. Sometimes what I find is an organization will have no objectives, and I walk into a meeting and tension's high and people have been yelling and they're sweating and there's water knocked over on the table and they're like, we're trying to decide which platform to use. And I'm like, that's not the decision here. That's not the decision. So let's get to our objectives first, and then let's argue about the right things, like how to hit the objectives, and not just people's agendas or what they feel passionate about. Because when you get into a passion contest with people, it's just not. It clouds everything. So
there's no winning in a passion contest.
No, and that's the CEO's job. That's the owner's job, is to get clear on those objectives. Can he or she use their team to get those objectives? Of course. But at the end of the day, that's part of your job, is to be clear on this is what we're chasing. This is what we're going to do.
So I got a couple more questions before we wrap this up. I'm thinking again about the 50 million-ish firm going to a $100 million firm. there's this analogy that I've shared before. It's, if you are an assembly plant, you produce 50 million bars per month. There's some, just a candy bar, and the consumer demand is 100 million bars a month, but you only have the infrastructure for 50. So now let's translate that into revenue. A staffing firm at 50 having the demand out there of 100, or they know the demand's out there. They know it's going to be multi-state or multi-industry. How do they put that infrastructure in place so they can produce the demand? How do they do that? How do they just go from 50 to 100? It's not going to happen overnight, but you've got to build out the infrastructure to support that 100 million.
Yeah. Yep. So a couple ways. One is partner with your customers. So your customers are trying to scale. We're trying to help them scale. At the end of the day, that's what those candy bars are doing, right? You're serving a customer who's serving a customer. So get them involved in the conversation. Tell them you want to scale. You'd be amazed at what they will give you for solutions. Hey, let's partner on this. You can use our space. You can use our people. You can use our resources. You can tap into our vendors. You can get our discounts. All that's great. You could partner with other staffing companies. There's a couple different ways to get competency and scale, and one of them is to buy it. So go get a loan. Go buy a company that's already doing that, your next closest competitor that's got a good process, and merge them in. That's an option. Use that hefty line of credit and those PPP funds that you've been squirreling away for a rainy day, and go buy some competency and function. And the old school way is to just grow it just a little bit at a time. Keep realistic goals and expectations. Set a good, healthy, challenging goal, but maybe do 5 million a year or something, and just do the best you can. The other thing to consider is, at that level, is it a quality play? Maybe we can do a little bit more by just increasing prices. Maybe we can get more efficient. So there's efficiency plays that can help free up some revenue that could help the business.
That's interesting. You could bootstrap it, go the organic route. So you build one line at a time.
Yep.
Or grow by 5 million a year.
Yep.
You could go do mergers or acquisitions, go find a company that will help you reach that next milestone.
Yep.
And that has to be a strategic purchase that's not your next and last step. That's the first step of the next 5 steps that you have to be very thoughtful about. And then work with your customers. Let them know what you're exploring, your aspirations, grow with them. Hey, I know you're in these 3 other states. We're servicing you here, but let's talk about helping you in these other states.
Yeah.
And enlisting maybe other agencies too, that could be a sub vendor, right?
Sure.
A lot of companies out there are looking for opportunities to piggyback off of existing business, just so they can keep their recruiters working, busy, happy. They can keep growing their business. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to get to that 100 million. And again, that's a really gray area for businesses that are looking for that clarity.
Yeah. I will say one thing to note in that conversation when you asked me that question. Where did I go first? What was the first piece of advice that I gave?
Yeah.
Go to the customer.
Go to the customer.
Go to the customer. You know how many staffing companies scale because they see what other staffing companies are doing? They want to scale because they see what other staffing companies are doing. They look at other staffing companies. Or you have a CEO that's doing a $50 million business, $100 million business, and they're like, I need to get a handle on the pulse of what's going on in my business. And where do they go? The branches. That's great. It's good that you do that. That's not where your business is growing. Your business is growing at the customer. If the CEOs or owners that are listening to this are at any one of these levels, 20 million, 50 million, 100 million, and you're thinking about getting to the next level, go to your customer. That's where the growth is going to come from. Go to your customer, reevaluate the marketplace, find out what customers want, what they're asking for, what their future is. That's where you're going to get the vision of what's next. It's not going to come from staffing company A next door. It's not going to come from your branches. Those things will help enable it, but that's not where the growth is really going to come from. There are companies out there that have leadership teams that have more understanding of Aviante or Bullhorn or their operating system than they do about their top 5 customers.
That's a scary thought.
That's a real thing. I see it every day. They haven't done a business review in 2 years, and they're on every steering committee meeting known to man. Go see your customer.
Preach.
Yep.
So when we look at, as we wrap this up, we look at the 10% of staffing US-based firms are at that 100 million size or higher. What is that maybe single biggest mindset shift you see in leaders who make that leap, or what's one non-negotiable that they need to focus on to even, have a shot at making this a success?
That it's possible, that it's possible, and that it can happen fast. It doesn't have to be a 10-year plan. Listen, the three of us have been around staffing enough that if the three of us said, hey, let's start a staffing branch, we could throw a dart at the US, pick a city, doesn't even matter. And the three of us could probably get a staffing branch to do $2 million in a year. I feel that very strongly.
Even in Fargo, North Dakota?
Even in Fargo, especially Fargo, North Dakota. I bet you there's less competition in Fargo, North Dakota. So the three of us get together, we start a $2 million staffing company in a year. Well, then it only takes 50 of these little factions, these little groups to get to $100 million. That's all we need. How many staffing companies were added to the mix through COVID over the last few years? I mean, it went from 20,000 to 28,000.
Yeah.
So the staffing dollars exist out there in the marketplace. It is possible. It's how you're going to scale. You have to believe it's possible, and then you got to come up with a plan of how you're going to do it. And obviously there's realistic, either you have the money or you don't, or you have the capacity or you don't, you have the people around you or you don't. You got to get that stuff in play. I know it's not easy to do, but the belief that it can be done in short order is part of it. Staffing companies start up all the time that have these aspirations of franchising or developing some model that's going to scale really quickly. Well, why not you? Why can't you do that? It's desire and belief that it's actually possible that's probably keeping you from being one of those that scale fast.
I love that. Sorry, I'm just like, okay. I love that. It's, first of all, you guys started off with, you got to believe it. You got to figure out, hey, you guess what? It is possible. And then the how, and figuring out, okay, is it going to be the investment part? Is it going to be the capacity, location, all of that?
Yeah.
All right. That was very inspirational. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
So Mark, and for those leaders that have those aspirations, but they don't quite know the how, reach out to Mark Winter. This has been a very insightful interview with you, from taking your business from 5 to 20 to 50 to 75 to 100 million, and the alignment that you need at the leadership level, the ratchets of growth that you've talked about, the pruning of unprofitable businesses, the balancing of sales, ops, and marketing, and the mindset that it takes to hit that next milestone. I think, Mark, is there anything else that you wanted to share that you haven't shared before we wrap it up?
Feel free to reach out to me as a resource. That's what we're here for. Our job is to help enable. I consider myself a staffing grandpa, so I'm here to come in and have fun with the kids and have a good time and make this thing grow. But there's a lot of other resources out there too, and folks can find me in all the usual places. I'm on LinkedIn, and we have a website and all that stuff, so people know. But go to a staffing association meeting, get your plan down, go back to the whiteboard days where you were dreaming, figure out what you want to be when you grow up, and if I can help put a plan together, great. If not, I can help you find somebody that can.
And where can people find you over the next couple staffing conferences? Because I know you're on that speaker circuit quite often. We saw you at Aviante Connect. What's next?
I'm going to TempNet in Park City next week. The end of next week, I'll be in TempNet in Park City. So I've never been to Park City. Super excited. Pretty bougie. I'm going to drink stuff with my pinky out. That'd be awesome. Then I've got AS Group in November, Staffing World's coming up. So all the typical places.
Hey, will we see you in Orlando?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Well, you're coming to TempNet. That's in Park City. We're headquarters in Salt Lake City, which you got to fly into. So you better come and say hi. I'll get you some Staffing Playbook swag.
Okay.
For your trip. But yeah.
Duly noted. And I do love to travel, and I'm super excited about going to Salt Lake City because there's a Shake Shack in the airport. Yeah.
Yes, there
That is true.
Yep. So I'll hit the swag right after I hit the Shake Shack. FYI.
Oh, I love it. All
Well,
right.
thanks for having me, guys. This has been fun.
Thank you. Appreciate it,
Perfect.
Mark Winter and Geneviève, my co-host. Thanks again. Great questions. And make sure you go follow Mark Winter. And if you're looking to scale your business, reach out to him, and he'll take good care of you. On that note, thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next week on the Staffing Playbook, the
All
number
right.
one podcast in staffing in the world.
There we go. You got to believe it.
Yep.
We'll see you guys.
Take care.
Hey, thanks for watching today's episode. This episode is sponsored by Staffing Referrals. We have relied on staffing referrals for years to turn satisfied associates into brand ambassadors, keeping quality talent coming in and lift retention. See what it can do for you at staffingreferrals.com or click on the link in the description. Thanks for watching.